Hi everyone, my name is Suranjali Seal, and like I always say, if you're somebody that loves literature and is all about literature, then this is the channel for you. In our video today, we're going to discuss the life and works of Ben Jonson. But before I get ahead and get on with the video itself, I would like to take a moment to thank each and every one of my subscribers for being here and accompanying me in this journey into deciphering what English literature is all about. And if you're new to my channel, then I welcome you sincerely and wholeheartedly into this journey that you and I are going to take together into deciphering what English literature is all about. Now, when it comes to our video for today, that is the life and works of Ben Jonson, I would like to suggest you to go and have a look at two of my other videos first and then return to this video. Why? Because one deals with the age of Elizabeth and the other deals with the life and works of William Shakespeare. Now, it is very important for you to understand the age to which Ben Jonson belonged to and the characteristics that characterize the age, because you see, we live in the 21st century, and the trends and the sensibilities of the 21st century, they influence us. We are who we are partly because we live in a society, and the society kind of shapes our thoughts, it shapes our thought processes, and all of that also does find itself expressed in literature as well. So if you have an idea of the age to which Ben Jonson and William Shakespeare likewise belonged to, then you will understand what influenced their writings. You will understand the way their thought process worked. And also, if you have an understanding of one of the greatest writers in the history of English drama, that is William Shakespeare, you will be able to better contrast the two writers and understand the importance in the history of English literature, because Shakespeare was writing at a time when scientific temper, the creativity, this age of exploration, everything was at its peak. And after William Shakespeare, the drama was in a state of decline, and it was during that period that Ben Jonson was writing. So therefore, make sure that you go and check the other two videos out so that your understanding of the topic is better. And without any further ado, let's get right into it. Now let us have a look at drama after William Shakespeare. Now, like I've already mentioned, drama was in a state of decline. Now, before Ben Jonson, the life of the times was reflected on stage, and now audience had considerably changed. So, I'll give you a very clear-cut example to understand this, okay? Now, before, that is when William Shakespeare was writing, and before him, his predecessors as well, there was no sort of intent, okay? The intent to go and watch the drama was not entertainment. Why people were going and watching the drama? It's because they wanted information. So what kind of information am I talking about? Today, in our 21st century, we have many movies, okay, that symbolically and directly also deal with social issues, isn't it? We have many movies that cater to social issues. When they're dealing with these social issues, the theme of social issues in the movies, what are they doing? They're depicting the society on screen, right? Whatever is the strength and also the weaknesses and the frailties of our society in the 21st century, that is depicted on stage through acting, dialogue, sound, music, everything, okay? The whole production centers around this intention to actually strike a chord in the heart of the audience. Whenever you're dealing with social issues and you're depicting the society on stage, the intent of the movie maker is to strike a chord in the heart of the audience, to stir the audience, to make them think, to make them question. So, about what is right and wrong. So there was this moral intent, okay? There's this moral intent behind these social issues and movies, okay? These social movies dealing with social issues. So imagine at a time of Shakespeare when there was no way to be informed about the society. Today we have news. We watch news, we read newspapers, and we get to know about what's happening in the societies. So we have direct news telling us that this crime has happened, that has happened, and we know that these are the weaknesses of our society. But that time, the only way to actually be informed that this is what our society is about, it was the drama. So when the people used to go to the theaters and they used to see men, women like them standing on stage and giving speeches, the dialogues centered around the truths of their society. They also depicted the ideals. For example, ideal like all that glitters is not gold. This is not a dialogue, it is a word of wisdom. It makes the audience think that yes, all that glitters is not gold. So there was this moral aspect to drama as well, and people used to go and watch these plays to be informed, to be informed about the society that they were living in, the strengths as well as the weaknesses of their society. But after William Shakespeare, because his successors lacked not only his genius but also his moral insight into life, that is, his successors did not have that moral insight into life. Because of that, the drama started to decline. There's also another logic to it. I'll just give you this understanding. Imagine if you are a movie maker, what will you make? If you are running a business, your idea is to make good movies, no doubt. You have to make good movies, but also you'll also focus on what draws the box office, right? You have to make sure that you actually, whatever you have invested, you have to get it back. That's the general idea. I'm not saying that that's the only thing that people do know, but it's a general idea. Now imagine at a time when during Shakespeare's there were these intellectuals, this information seeking audience going and watching the plays. So the plays were produced that kind to cater to their needs. Now the audience are those people who are idle and have nothing better to do. They want to go just for spectacle. They wanted to go to watch the drama just to be entertained. So the drama will be produced according to that taste, right? Because the audience are coming to watch these plays, so they will make the plays according to their tastes. So before the audience were these information seeking audience. Now we have the audience that is idle and doesn't goes to watch the drama just to be entertained. So entertainment again was made a priority. Now if you have seen the Mystery Miracle Morality play that I had uploaded earlier, there too you will see twice in the history of English drama, I mean in the history of the drama, twice we see that drama has religious roots, begins with a different intent and different source, and then it travels towards entertainment and debasement, and there are moral issues towards drama, and twice it had already been banned, okay, it had ended completely, and then it re-emerged again. Now here too you'll see that during Shakespeare's time it began with this heightened sensibilities, the senses were at its peak, creativity was at its peak, and now gradually after Ben Jonson, after William Shakespeare, during the time that Ben Jonson was writing, you see we are coming towards that decline again. Drama started to decline, was in a state of decline. Now why is Ben Jonson important? Because Shakespeare's successors, like I said, lacked not only his genius but also his moral insight into life, with the exception of Ben Jonson. That means during that time when drama was in a state of decline, Ben Jonson held on to that moral intent. He had this moral insight which he actually delivered through his drama. So that is why Ben Jonson is important. Now let's have a look at some of the concrete facts regarding Ben Jonson's life. Now I've done this in every other video that I've covered, okay, regarding the writers. There are some facts that need explaining, and there are other facts that are just concrete and very simple to understand. So these are some of the facts of his life that we need to acquaint ourselves with, and there are other facts which I will cover gradually as we progress through this video. For example, he's the one who popularized the comedy of humors. He is the proponent of the masks in Elizabethan theatre. So we have to look at that needs explanation, but here at this point the facts about his life are quite crystal clear, so let's just look at them, okay? So Jonson is one of the most commanding literary figures among the Elizabethans. He came from an influential family. He studied in a private school and then made his way to Westminster School, and may have also studied in Cambridge. His father was thrown into prison by Queen Mary. After his release, he gave up his estate and became a minister. He died just before his son's birth, and 2 years later, Jonson's mother married a bricklayer of London. Jonson went with the English army to fight the Spaniards. He returned and soon married at the age of 19 and 20. 5 years later, we find him employed, just like Shakespeare, as an actor and reviser of old plays. So these are concrete facts. Now, important facts from these that we have to remember when we're reading Jonson's works is that he came from an influential family. Second, that he knew the bricklayer's trade as well. And third, that he, just like Shakespeare, first was an actor, then a reviser of old plays, and finally he started writing his own plays as well. So this is the takeaway from this very short and crisp slide. Let's move on to his contributions. Now let's have a look at one of the most interesting parts of the video, okay, which is the comedy of humors, which was propounded and popularized by Ben Jonson. Now, see, Ben Jonson is generally regarded as the second most important dramatist after William Shakespeare during the reign of James I. So it is after the death of Queen Elizabeth I, okay? So Benjamin Jonson was born on the 11th of June, 1572. He is an English playwright and poet. His contribution was to English poetry and stage comedy. He popularized the comedy of humors. So we have to understand what do we mean by the comedy of humors, right? Now, comedy of humors is a genre of dramatic comedy that focuses on a character or a range of characters, each of whom exhibits two or more overriding traits or humors. Now, let's understand this, okay? Now imagine you and I and everybody around us, okay, the people of the world, we are a mixture of emotions, aren't we? We are sometimes sad, sometimes happy, sometimes angry, and other times jealous. Sometimes, you know, we have these kind of traits in us that makes us human, basically. So what happens is there's no one trait that is overriding. Overriding as in we don't have one trait, okay, in us, as in we're not always happy, we're not always sad, we're not always jealous, and we're not always angry, because that will be very unrealistic. Imagine a person who's 24/7 angry. We don't find such people. We have a mixture of emotions. That's what makes us human, right? But in the comedy of humors, you will find a character or a range of character in whom two or one or two or more traits are overriding, as in these characters, they exhibit two traits or more traits that are overriding in them. For example, they might be always happy or always sad. They might be too optimistic or they'll be too depressed. You know, there's no balance between the emotions. It's always overriding. And here they are saying overriding traits or humors. So we have to understand what the word humor means. Here, humor is not in the sense of comedy. It's not in the sense of something funny. Humor over here has a history that we have to understand. Humor here, or maybe the word humor over here would deal with or refer to humorism. Okay, humorism or humor theory, humoralism, is a system of medicine detailing a supposed makeup and working of the human body adopted by ancient Greek and Roman physicians and philosophers. So humor, like I said, does not mean something funny when we say comedy of humors. Comedy is already funny. We mean comedy. Comedy of humors as in these overriding traits in the characters. So humorism has a history to it, and its roots lie in ancient Greek and Roman physician and philosophers. Okay, now what is humorism? Now, according to humoralism, 4 body fluids. We have blood, then we have yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. Now, determined a person's temperament, and an imbalance led to certain sicknesses dependent upon which humors were in excess or deficit. So, you see, this technicality you don't have to understand, you just have to know this, that according to humoralism, there were 4 bodily fluids, okay, that actually regulates our emotions. I'm saying it very simply, okay, just for your understanding. So, you know, your temperament, okay, so it depends on your blood, yellow bile duct, black bile, and phlegm. These are the ones that will actually determine your attitude. It will determine your character. And imbalance, if there's too much of yellow bile and less of phlegm, if there's too much of phlegm and less of black bile, if there's an imbalance like that, it will affect your temperament. It might cause sicknesses, and it might also determine how you react to situations. If something is in deficit, if something is in excess, if too much of deficit, then that will be a problem. In excess also, that will be a problem. And these fluids, bodily fluids, actually affected a person's temperament. So, you know, if you have too much of something, then you might be too happy. If you have too much of something else, then you might be too sad. So it's this excess and deficit, not the balance, excess and deficit, that guided one's temperament. So this is what we mean by humors. And in the comedy of humors, you know, there's excess of 1 or 2 traits, overriding traits, or there's a deficit of the other. Imagine if a person is too happy or too jealous, and there's a deficit of sadness and depression, or a person is too sad and too jealous, and there's a deficit of happiness. So you understand, comedy of humors wouldn't just mean that it's funny. It actually is depicting a range of characters or a character who have these overriding traits. Okay, so this is what comedy of humors actually means. So now let's move on further. Now let's have a look at the comedy of humors, okay? So the English playwrights Ben Jonson and George Chapman popularized the genre in the closing years of the 16th century. Now in the later half of the 17th century, it was combined with the comedy of manners in Restoration comedy. Now see, we will obviously be dealing with Restoration comedy as we progress through our videos, right? But I included comedy of manners here in this video so that your idea of the comedy of humors is clear, because there's a difference between the two. Later it was combined, no doubt, but for now you have to understand the difference between the comedy of humors and the comedy of manners, okay? Humors is the trait. It is a particular trait in a person, okay? But manners is in general the mannerisms of the society. Okay, so it is a genre of realistic satirical comedy that questions and comments upon the manners and social conventions of a greatly sophisticated artificial society. So when you deal with comedy of humors, it is sometimes unrealistic because there's one trait overpowering all the others, right? So it's funny and sometimes unrealistic. But when it comes to the mannerisms, when it comes to the comedy of manners, we're dealing with the weaknesses of the society. We're dealing with this artificial society who's pretending to be sophisticated, okay? And now we're dealing with their mannerisms, the weaknesses of the society. So manners, comedy of humors, that is traits, and comedy of manners, that is mannerisms, the way of life of this sophisticated artificial society. So it is realistic and it is also satirical comedy, okay? So you understand these two difference, and that's why you will be more clear about what humor and manners, comedy of humors and comedy of manners actually means. Now for an example, The Importance of Being Earnest, 1895 by Oscar Wilde, which satirizes the sexual hypocrisies of Victorian morality. All of this, like I always mention, will be dealt in with detail in the videos that are to come. We are going to deal with Oscar Wilde in the Victorian era, so we'll focus on this Elizabethan era for now, and just remember the examples. The Importance of Being Earnest, okay, by Oscar Wilde. So now what happens in the comedy of manners is that later the comedy of humors and manners are joined together in the later half of the 17th century. So when we progress through the videos and reach the 17th century, we'll deal with it there. Now with regards to the comedy of humors, in Jonson's Every Man in His Humour, acted 1598, it made this type of play popular. All the words and acts of Kitley are controlled by an overpowering suspicion that his wife is unfaithful. So there's this character, Kitley, and what happens to him is that he has this suspicion that his wife is unfaithful, and that is what guides his actions. That is what guides his words that come out of his mouth. So there's this overpowering trait of jealousy. This is an overpowering trait of suspicion. So it might be unrealistic, it's funny, but it also depicts his character. It's quite probable that he's very suspicious of his wife. Then you have another country gull in the town, which determines his every decision by his desire to catch on to the manners of the city gallant. So he wants to copy the city gallant, okay? He wants to become like the city gallant, so much so that everything that he says and every decision in his life is from his desire to catch on. He wants to catch on to the traits of the city gallant, okay? And that's what drives him. That's what drives his character. That's what drives his words. That's what drives his actions. So this is the comedy of humors, one particular trait which overpowers all the others in a person, okay? Now in his introduction to Every Man Out of His Humor, see, there are two plays you have to remember. One is Every Man in His Humor and the other one is Every Man Out of His Humor, okay? So Jonson explains this character formula. What he says is, someone peculiar quality does so possesses a man that it does draw all his effects, his spirits, his powers in their confluxions, all to run one way. So what he's trying to say, he tells us about what guides his character development, okay? What he's saying himself, Ben Jonson himself is saying that I want to focus on this peculiar quality in every person, that every person has this one peculiar quality. Now if that quality, okay, overpowers the person, say if a person is too emotional, if that overpowers the person, that day-to-day life, no, that emotion will guide him. If it's too overpowering over the other traits, that particular overpowering emotion will guide the person. So if a person is proud, say he's filled with pride, then pride will be the driving force of his actions, of his words. In every step of their life, they're going to perform actions which is guided by pride itself, and all other traits are kind of suppressed in the background. So this is what he says, that it causes, okay, this one overpowering trait, it causes all the other traits to run one way, that is guided by pride, okay, for example. So this is the comedy of humors. So let's move on further. Now, Ben Jonson is best known for his play Everyman in His Humour, Volpone or the Fox, The Alchemist, and Bartholomew Fair, and for his lyric and epigrammatic poetry. So we have to understand what is lyric and of course what is epigrammatic poetry. So lyric is a formal type of poetry which expresses personal emotions or feelings, typically spoken in the first person. So lyric as in it is not equivalent to the song lyric of the Greek lyric, okay. In Greece, I remember, if I remember correctly, it was usually song lyric would mean that you are reciting or you are singing and you're playing on the lyre. There's an instrument called the lyre and you play on that and you sing, and because it's the lyre, from there the term lyric comes, okay, lyre, so lyric. But this is not what we mean by lyric, not the song lyric, okay. Here it is a formal type of poetry which expresses personal emotions or feelings, okay, and it is typically spoken in the first person. So it is about emotions and feelings that are being expressed. Now when it comes to epigrammatic poetry, we have to contrast it with satire to understand it better. Epigrammatic poetry or an epigram is a brief, interesting, memorable, sometimes surprising or satirical statement. The Oxford Learner's Dictionary defines an epigram as a short poem or phrase that expresses an idea in a clever or humorous way. So you see, it has some kind of link with satire. You can see some kind of similarity, that here we are giving a satirical statement. It is an interesting, memorable line. It is a short poem that expresses an idea in a clever way. But you have to understand in concrete terms what is the difference between satire and epigram. A satire is a composition, generally poetical, holding up vice to reprobation or criticism. That is, we use satire in order to rebuke. We sometimes use exaggeration also to actually kind of rebuke or to question and to criticize the society, okay, to take up a trait or a convention or a way of life and criticize it if it's bad, okay. So that is a satire, when we want to expose the weaknesses and then we want to criticize it, okay. But when it comes to epigram, it is a remark. It is a short remark. It is usually documented also. It is a short remark which is witty and it is full of wisdom as well. So for example, if I can remember, Oscar Wilde had said that nobody can make you feel inferior without your consent. So you see, it is a witty remark and it is a food for thought, you know, it is full of wisdom. So a satire is a composition, okay, which actually exposes the frailties, which criticizes the weaknesses, okay, of the society or of a person. But an epigram is a short, witty remark, okay, it is a witty remark, and this form of poetry has been actually popularized by Ben Jonson. So let's move on further. Now, we do know that Ben Jonson had a very vibrant political career, okay, and he was very motivated, politically motivated. He had a lot of aspirations as far as politics is concerned, and there are many achievements as well. So if you're interested in that, you can go and have a look at it online. I did not cover it here because his political career is not really important for us as literature students, okay. So what we have to focus on is the literary aspect of it all. So here I have covered one fact which is important, that he did have a patronage. He did have a patron, and he received a yearly pension of £60, okay. So you have to understand this concept of poet laureate, okay. Officially recorded in the history of English literature, officially, John Dryden is known to be England's first poet laureate. But because Ben Jonson received a pension of £60, some people do believe that he is England's first poet laureate, okay? But officially recorded, it's John Dryden. So what is this poet laureate all about? Poet laureate is somebody who is recognized by the government or the conferring institution. Conferring institution as in, if I'm giving you money, if I'm paying you for writing poetry, so I'm the conferring institution giving you, okay, the money. So this conferring institution recognizes a person, okay, a poet, and gives him the duty to compose poems on special occasions, okay? You have to write, if there's say any national holiday, you have to write the poem for that, okay? You have to write a poem on that. So it's like, it's your duty to do it and you're getting paid for it. Now, John Dryden was officially declared the poet laureate, okay, and he used to get his salary, or also a yearly pension as well. But Ben Jonson also received a yearly pension, all right, but he is not considered the poet laureate because that time probably the concept was not there as a poet laureate, but he did get a yearly pension, and that's why some people believe that he is England's poet laureate. But remember always that officially it was John Dryden. We'll cover it in my John Dryden's video, but officially it was John Dryden, okay? So I hope this idea of poet laureate is clear, okay, in this part of the video. Now let's have a look at the general characteristics of Ben Jonson's drama. Now his works are in contrast with that of Shakespeare and the later dramatists of the Elizabethan age. So what are the characteristics that distinguish Ben Jonson's plays from the other dramatists of the age? The plays of Ben Jonson cover the duration of a few hours or a single day. So that is, imagine, okay, in Shakespeare's plays, we have witnessed that the duration, the period that is covered through his plays, it expands over weeks, it expands over months, it can also expand over years, okay? But in Ben Jonson's case, his dramas cover the period of a few hours or a single day. So he tries to keep things very realistic, okay? He never takes liberties with historical facts like Shakespeare does in his plays. Now, if you have watched the video that I had made on William Shakespeare, you will have known, because I have already dealt with the characteristics of his plays, and you will know that we have dealt in detail with the fact that Shakespeare does take liberties with historical facts, that his source of inspiration is other texts, other sources. I have mentioned in that video quite clearly that in that book, The History of English Literature by William J. Long, in that book it is clearly mentioned that Shakespeare invents very few, if any, new plots for his plays. He does not invent that many plots or new plots in his plays. Everything that he writes is inspired from other sources. He takes materials from other works and then he breathes his wisdom and his words and his creativity into them. And that's what captivates us. But in case of Ben Jonson, he does not take those liberties. He does not take liberties with historical facts at all. He tries to keep things very, very real, okay? And Jonson's poetry, like his drama, abound in classical learning. So like I've mentioned that Ben Jonson was trying his level best to actually preserve this classical streak in drama, okay, because it was a stage of decline for the drama, and with it this classical this intellectual fascination with the classical learning was also declining. So therefore he tried his best to actually preserve this trend, this classical influence, okay? So his drama abound in classical learning. Then they are logically constructed. Like I said, he's trying to keep things very real, so his drama, the scenes and everything, the plot is logically constructed. Tragedy and comedy are kept apart. Interestingly, realistic men and women of the times, he portrays them exactly as they are. So, they are logically constructed, and the tragedy and comedy are kept apart. So, technically in Shakespeare's tragedy also there are comic scenes, there are court jesters, okay, but in his comedies also there are tragic scenes. But in case of Ben Jonson, he keeps the two apart, and also he depicts in his plays, he depicts the men and women and the society exactly as they are, okay? That's his genius, that's his contribution, that he's able to depict them that realistically, okay? His first comedy is Every Man in His Humor, in which Shakespeare also acted, is key to all his dramas. So Every Man in His Humor is key to all his dramas. That is, if you want one text that will actually describe to you who Ben Jonson is and what his works are like, this is the go-to play. If you read Every Man in His Humor, you will get and understand what Ben Jonson is all about. And also in my Shakespeare video also I have mentioned that Shakespeare's name features in the cast list of Every Man in His Humor. So Shakespeare acted, okay, in Every Man in His Humor, which is written by Ben Jonson. Now, two of Ben Jonson's poems formed the prefatory verse that opens Shakespeare's first folio. Now, in my Shakespeare's video, I already dealt with the first folio. I've dealt with the meaning of the folio and the quarto, book binding and everything. So if you haven't watched that video, make sure you go and watch it first. And so in the first folio, in Shakespeare's first folio, Ben Jonson's poems, okay, it formed the preface or the prefatory verse, okay, of this first folio. And what is the name? To the memory of my beloved, the author, Mr. William Shakespeare, and what he hath left us. Okay, so this is the title. So it is his most influential and revealing commentary on Shakespeare. So if you want to know what Ben Jonson had talked about Shakespeare, what were his opinions about Shakespeare, this is the go-to prefatory verse, okay? And you'll find it in Shakespeare's first folio. Now let's move on further. Now let's look at Ben Jonson and the Mask. Now the first masque performed for James I and his wife Anne of Denmark in 1605 was Masque of Blackness, created by Inigo Jones and Ben Jonson. So what are the facts that we have to remember here? First, what is the name of the first masque that was performed? It is Masque of Blackness. And who was it performed for? It was performed for James I and his wife Anne of Denmark. Which year was it performed? 1605. Now, who created these masks? It was Inigo Jones and Ben Jonson. So these are the concrete facts that we have to remember, okay? Now, it was commissioned by the Queen, in which she and her ladies appeared and danced with blacked up faces, okay? Now, see, when we think about the mask today, it is almost like an external cover that covers the truth inside, right? It is like a mask, a face mask which we wear. Now, this concept, this idea of the mask as an external cover, it developed gradually over centuries, okay? But initially, when we had the first performance, it was actually the Queen and her ladies who had appeared and danced with blacked up faces, okay? So this is the first masque. Now let's understand what is a masque. Now the masque was a form of festive courtly entertainment that flourished in the 16th and early 17th century Europe. So the masque, as we know it, it developed in Europe, okay, in the 16th and early 17th centuries. But it has roots in Italy, okay. In Italy, there was this concept of courtly entertainment, okay. In Italy too, there was this plays that were performed in between, okay. There were plays that were being performed in between plays, in between acts, and these plays were called intermedio, okay. Intermedio, it is one form of the masque, intermedio, in between, right? So from there, those are the like roots, you can say, one form of the masque, and then from there it traveled, because Renaissance, remember in my Age of Elizabeth video, I told you that Renaissance traveled from Italy to England, came to England during the Age of Elizabeth. So this is the period that we're talking about, the Age of Elizabeth. So the intermedio was one form of the masque, and now we have the masks that we're talking about, which developed in England or in Europe in the 16th and the early 17th centuries, okay. And Ben Jonson was the one who popularized both the comedy of humors, and he was also the one who wrote the first masque, okay. Now the masque involved music, dancing, singing and acting, elaborate stage design, and the architectural framing and costumes employed were sometimes designed by a renowned architect to present a differential allegory flattering to the patron. So you see, there's this entertainment aspect to the masque. In contrast to the seriously morally centered drama of the period, we have one element of entertainment. You see, when you see Shakespeare's drama, or Christopher Marlowe's, or even Ben Jonson's, there's this moral insight, moral aspect to the drama, but the masks cater to entertainment only. So you had music and dancing and singing and great architecture to actually allure the audience, to captivate the audience. So it was solely for entertainment. A masque imagery tended to be drawn from classical rather than Christian sources. Now you would know, if you have watched my Mystery, Miracle and Morality play video, you would know that in the Middle Ages, in those movable theaters, there were plays that were performed and the themes were drawn from Christian sources. But in case of the masque, it was drawn from classical sources, okay. Now, a masque is an elaborate theatre-style performance typically comprising choreographed dancing by disguised actors who portrayed a story or theme to the audience. They were complex, widely lavish in costume and color, and greatly enjoyed at court and in the private homes of wealthy aristocrats. So again, what are the keywords? Theatre style performance is the keyword. Of course, disguise is the keyword. And also, they were widely lavish in costumes and color is the keyword. So there's this entertainment aspect to the masks, okay? So guys, we've reached the works of Ben Jonson. Now, for the purpose of this video, I think it's better for you to actually take in everything that I have said first and just jot down the important plays of Ben Jonson. These are the works of Ben Jonson. You can look at it. In the next slide, I have dealt with the masks, a list of the masks that he had written. So I think that you can just jot them down, pause the video and actually jot them down. I'll just slide past the video, okay? And you can jot these names down, and everything that you see in yellow is what I'm going to explain in part 2 of the video. The plays that are in yellow, okay, whatever I've marked in yellow, I'll give you a summary of it in a separate video. So for now, make sure you jot these plays down along with their timeline, okay? So guys, we've come to the end of our video. We have reached the conclusion of Ben Jonson's life and his works, and in part 2 we'll be dealing with his works specifically, only the summary of his works and a few facts that we need to know about his works. We'll center not on the person that Ben Jonson was, but we'll center ourselves or concentrate on his works only, okay, in part 2. So let's just give a nice roundabout conclusion to Ben Jonson, and then we'll be done for this video. We'll be done with it, okay? Jonson fought against the romantic tendencies of the age. His rough honesty brought him into conflict with almost all of his contemporaries. He fought bravely to restore the classic form of the drama and keep the stage from its downward course. Jonson died in 1637. Unlike Shakespeare's, his death was viewed as a national calamity. Now, why national calamity? See, because he was politically recognized. He did have ambitions, like I said, and he was politically recognized, and his patron was King James I himself. So his death was viewed as a national calamity. Then he was buried in Westminster Abbey. On his grave was laid a marble slab on which "O rare Ben Jonson" are words as his epitaph. So you can see the picture down there in Westminster Abbey. This is his grave, and "O rare Ben Jonson" is his epitaph. So we've come to the end of this video. I sincerely hope this video has been helpful for you, and if it has, then don't forget to like the video, share the video, and subscribe to my channel for similar content. And till we meet again, love all things literature and more power to you. Thank you.